I am Adam, a 34-year-old software engineer who was married to Jessica for 7 years. We once had what I thought was the perfect relationship full of love and dreams for our future together. But after 3 years, everything changed when she started using intimacy as a weapon to control me. Before I tell you how I finally stood up for myself, let me know where you are watching from and subscribe to follow my journey of how I reclaimed my life and found myself again. When I first met Jessica, it was at a tech fair in Seattle. Her intelligence and confidence immediately drew me to her. She had this way of talking about her marketing career that was captivating, and her smile could light up the entire convention center. I still remember how nervous I felt asking for her number and the excitement when she suggested getting coffee right then and there instead of waiting. Our dating phase was nothing short of magical. We spent weekends exploring hidden trails in the Olympic National Park, had impromptu road trips down the California coast, and countless nights discussing everything from quantum physics to our favorite childhood cartoons. Jessica was adventurous, loving, and seemed to understand me in ways no one else ever had. After 18 months of dating, I proposed during a sunset picnic at Golden Gardens Beach. 6 months later, we had a small but intimate wedding at a boutique hotel overlooking Monterey Bay. Surrounded by 40 of our closest friends and family, we promised to love each other forever. The look in her eyes made me believe those promises would never be broken. The first 3 years of marriage were mostly blissful. I was climbing the career ladder at my software company, eventually becoming a senior developer. Jessica was thriving as a marketing manager at a growing startup. We saved enough to buy our first house in a nice suburb, a cozy 3-bedroom craftsman with a backyard perfect for the children we planned to have someday. Our evenings were filled with cooking together, planning future travels, and enjoying each other. Our physical relationship was passionate and loving, a natural expression of our connection that brought us closer. Jessica would often surprise me with candlelit dinners or spontaneous date nights, and I would leave her love notes or bring home her favorite flowers. We communicated openly, laughed often, and supported each other through stressful work periods. The first signs of change were subtle. Jessica began making comments when I wanted to meet my friends for our monthly poker night. What started as "I miss you when you were gone" evolved into "I guess your friends are more important than quality time with your wife." I began noticing her irritation when I did not immediately respond to her texts, or if dinner was not prepared exactly how she expected. Her jokes started carrying a strange undertone. "We all know who really wears the pants in this relationship, right, Adam?" she would say at dinner parties, laughing, but with eyes that dared me to contradict her. Friends would chuckle awkwardly, and I would smile, not wanting to make a scene. In private, these comments increased, always wrapped in humor that made it difficult to address without seeming overly sensitive. Jessica began complaining more frequently. "I do so much for us, and you never notice," she would say, even when I regularly thanked her and tried to share household responsibilities equally. No matter how much I did, it never seemed enough. The first time I felt the true sting of rejection was on my 32nd birthday. I had worked late finishing a project, coming home around 8:30 p.m. instead of the usual 6. Jessica had prepared dinner, but when I walked in, she silently put my portion in the refrigerator and went upstairs. When I followed her to apologize, she was already in bed with her back to my side. I tried to kiss her goodnight, and she pulled away. "You obviously do not care about our time together, so why should I care about your physical needs?" she said coldly. I was confused and hurt, but apologized profusely, promising to manage my work schedule better. The incident blew over after a few days of me making extra efforts to please her, but something fundamental had shifted. The next weekend, I suggested we stay in for a movie night. Jessica agreed, but became increasingly distant as the evening progressed. When I tried to initiate intimacy later, she turned away. "If you want that kind of attention, maybe you should take me somewhere nicer than our living room. Tracy from work says her husband took her to that new 5-star restaurant downtown last weekend." I was stunned. Our physical relationship had never had conditions before. Still wanting to make her happy, I booked reservations for the following weekend. The pattern was established, though I did not recognize it at the time. I thought we were just going through a rough patch, that things would improve if I tried harder to be the husband she wanted. Within months, Jessica had created an unspoken but clearly defined list of requirements I needed to meet to earn physical affection. When I gently questioned this new dynamic one evening, her reaction was immediate and intense. "Do you think you deserve intimacy just because we are married? Relationships take work, Adam. I need to feel appreciated and valued before I can give myself to you like that." The argument that followed ended with me sleeping on the couch for the first time in our marriage. The next morning, Jessica acted as though nothing had happened, but the message was clear: question her terms and face consequences. Soon Jessica began checking my phone and personal belongings, claiming she had a right to know everything as my wife. If I received a text during dinner, she would ask who it was from before I even read it. If I did not immediately hand over my phone for inspection, I would be met with accusations of hiding something, followed by days of coldness and sleeping arrangements on the couch. If you have nothing to hide, why do you care? If I look, became her common refrain, making it impossible to defend my privacy without seeming suspicious. The financial control began gradually. Jessica suggested combining our accounts for simplicity, which seemed reasonable at first. She offered to handle our bills and budgeting since she had a background in finance. Before long, she was questioning every purchase I made. $40 for lunch with a coworker. Are you dating her behind my back? She would demand, ignoring the fact that business lunches in downtown Seattle were expensive, especially at the places she deemed acceptable for someone of my 40s. Professional status. I began asking permission for even small purchases. A new book, a replacement part for my mountain bike that had gathered dust in the garage, even a coffee during a work break, would trigger interrogations if not pre-approved. The ultimate financial betrayal came when Jessica withdrew $12,000 from our joint savings to purchase a new luxury crossover SUV without discussing it with me. When I expressed concern about such a major decision made unilaterally, she erupted. I work hard for our money too. Are you saying I do not deserve a nice car? Maybe if you got that promotion last year, instead of playing it safe, money would not be so tight. The next day, I discovered my access to our joint account had been restricted. Jessica explained it as a security measure after she claimed to have noticed suspicious activity. The bank confirmed no such activity, but without her authorization, they could not restore my access to what was in effect my own money. My social world contracted as Jessica methodically created distance between me and my support network. She would find fault with my family, particularly my older sister Diane, who she claimed was always judging our relationship. Your sister looks at me like I am not good enough for you, she would say after family gatherings. Did you hear how she asked about my career? She was implying I am not successful. These interpretations escalated until interactions with my family became so stressful that I began making excuses to avoid them. Jessica would either create a scene during visits or punish me afterward with days of silent treatment. My friendships suffered similarly. Jessica would criticize my friends, claim they were a bad influence, or create situations that made it uncomfortable for them to be around us. Frank, my best friend since college, gradually stopped inviting me to gatherings after Jessica repeatedly interrogated his wife about their marriage during the few occasions we socialized together. Jessica demanded access to all my communications, reading texts, emails, and listening to voicemails. As your wife, I should know everything about your life, she insisted, framing her surveillance as interest rather than control. If I received a call and stepped into another room to take it, I would return to accusations of secretiveness and emotional affairs. Gradually, I found myself isolated with Jessica as my primary social connection. I felt increasingly alone with no one to offer perspective on what was happening in my marriage. The weaponization of our physical relationship became even more explicit. Jessica established a system where intimacy was directly tied to specific achievements on my part. An expensive dinner might earn a kiss goodnight. A weekend getaway she selected could result in fuller intimacy, but only if everything during the trip met her standards. You want to be close tonight. What have you done to deserve it? Did you book that spa day I mentioned? No? Well, maybe you should think about your priorities. She began comparing me unfavorably to other men, particularly her boss, Richard. Richard bought his wife diamond earrings just because it was Tuesday. What have you done for me lately? Or Richard works out every day and still has energy to satisfy his wife whenever she wants. Maybe you should follow his example. The threats became more direct. With how you have been acting, any woman would be looking elsewhere. You should be grateful I am still here. Each comment cut deeply, but I continued trying to save our marriage, believing that love meant working through difficult times. I made excuses for her behavior, blamed myself for not being attentive enough, and kept hoping things would improve. Frank, who had maintained occasional contact, despite Jessica's efforts, finally spoke up during a rare lunch when Jessica was out of town. This is not normal, Adam. The way she treats you. The control, the manipulation. You know that, right? I defended her, citing work stress and her difficult childhood, but his words lingered. Similarly, Diane called after 6 months of minimal contact, concern evident in her voice. We barely see you anymore, Adam. Mom is worried sick, and so am I. This is not like you. What is happening? Again, I made excuses, but doubt had begun to creep in. Still, I clung to the idea that marriage required sacrifice and that my love for Jessica could overcome these challenges. I convinced myself that I was partly to blame, that I had not been attentive enough, successful enough, or understanding enough of her needs. I began questioning my own perceptions. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe this was normal in long-term relationships. Maybe I did need to try harder. The confident, independent person I had once been was fading, replaced by someone who constantly sought approval and walked on eggshells in his own home. Our 7th wedding anniversary approached, and despite everything I wanted to make it special, I planned a surprise weekend at the mountain lodge, where we had spent our first Christmas as a married couple. I arranged for time off work, coordinated with the lodge for special amenities, and even commissioned a custom piece of jewelry that incorporated stones from a beach we had visited on our honeymoon. 2 days before our anniversary, Jessica casually mentioned over dinner, "Oh, by the way, I will be going to Portland this weekend for a marketing conference with Richard. It came up suddenly, and it is too important to miss. We can celebrate our anniversary when I get back." The timing seemed suspicious, especially since she had not mentioned any conference during our previous discussions about anniversary plans. When I expressed disappointment and suggested she might reschedule given the significance of the date, her response was immediate and harsh. "This is exactly why I cannot rely on you to understand my career. This conference could lead to a promotion, but all you care about is some arbitrary date." Richard would never ask his wife to compromise her career for a dinner. That night, while Jessica was showering, her phone repeatedly buzzed with incoming messages. I had never invaded her privacy before, despite her regular inspections of my devices. But something about the situation, the timing, and her increasingly frequent mentions of Richard compelled me to look. The messages confirmed my worst fears. Jessica and Richard had been having an affair for months. The conference was actually a weekend getaway they had planned at a coastal resort. There were intimate details I could never unread, plans they had made, and worst of all, jokes at my expense about how oblivious I was. When Jessica emerged from the bathroom and saw me with her phone, her reaction was not guilt or remorse, but rage at my breach of her privacy. The irony might have been laughable if it were not so painful. "How dare you go through my personal messages?" she shouted, snatching the phone from my hands. "Jessica, you have been having an affair," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. "You and Richard are planning a weekend together, not a conference." Her strategy shifted instantly from denial to attack. "What did you expect? You have been emotionally unavailable for years. You never satisfy my needs. Richard appreciates me in ways you never have." When I pointed out the hypocrisy of her demands for my constant attention while she was investing emotionally and physically in someone else, she delivered the ultimatum that would ultimately free me. "Either you stop questioning me and accusing me, or you can forget about any intimacy between us ever again. Your choice, Adam." In that moment, something broke and simultaneously healed within me. I saw with perfect clarity what our relationship had become, and the person I had allowed myself to become within it. "Keep it forever, Jessica. I do not want it anymore. Not like this." The shock on her face was undeniable. Her ultimate weapon of control had just been rendered powerless. For years, she had used intimacy as a reward, and its withdrawal as punishment. By relinquishing my desire for it, I had reclaimed my power in the relationship. That moment of clarity extended beyond our physical relationship. I suddenly saw everything from an objective perspective. I remembered the confident, passionate person I had been before this relationship slowly eroded my sense of self. I recalled how I used to make decisions without fear, how I had opinions and boundaries that I did not hesitate to express. The next day, I met Frank for coffee, the first time I had reached out to him without checking with Jessica first. He told me things I had not known: how Jessica had contacted his wife multiple times to suggest I was unhappy with our friendship, how she had spread rumors about his business ethics among our mutual acquaintances. "I tried to tell you, man," Frank said, "but she had you so wrapped up I did not know how to get through." I called Diane that evening, and our conversation lasted for hours. She told me how the family had been worried, how they had noticed the changes in me, how Jessica had been systematically isolating me by creating conflicts, and then presenting herself as my only ally. "We've missed you," Diane said, her voice breaking. "We've been waiting for you to see what was happening." With their support, I sought help from a therapist who specialized in emotional abuse and controlling relationships. The therapist helped me see that what I had experienced was not normal marital difficulty, but a pattern of control and emotional manipulation. She recommended steps to protect myself emotionally and legally as I worked toward ending the relationship. I consulted with a divorce attorney who advised me on how to document the financial control and emotional abuse. I opened a separate bank account at a different institution and began depositing my paychecks there. I gathered evidence of Jessica's affair and her financial mismanagement of our joint resources. I found an apartment with a short-term lease and quietly arranged to move essential belongings there when Jessica was at work. I reconnected with friends and family, rebuilding the support network I would need in the challenging months ahead. Once everything was in place, I confronted Jessica again, this time from a position of preparation and strength. As expected, she cycled through her usual tactics: denial, anger, blame, and when those did not work, tearful pleas and promises to change. "I can be better, Adam. I will get therapy. I will stop seeing Richard." Please do not throw away 7 years over one mistake. When emotional manipulation failed, she resorted to threats. "You will never find anyone who loves you like I do. I will take everything in the divorce. You will have nothing." Standing firm in my decision, I responded with the truth that had finally become clear to me. "You can take the material things, Jessica, the house, the cars, whatever you want, but you cannot take my self-respect anymore. That is mine again." That evening, I moved the last of my essential belongings to my new apartment. As I placed my key to our house on the counter, I felt not grief, but relief. The door that closed behind me was not an ending, but an opening to a new beginning. The first weeks in my apartment were simultaneously lonely and liberating. After years of constant monitoring and criticism, the silence felt strange but increasingly peaceful. I could leave dishes in the sink, without criticism, watch documentaries Jessica had deemed boring, or simply sit with my thoughts without justifying my silence. My therapist helped me recognize and process the trauma of the emotional abuse I had endured. I learned that my experience was not uncommon, particularly for men who often do not recognize relationship control as abuse or are reluctant to acknowledge it due to social expectations of masculinity. We worked on identifying the childhood patterns that had made me vulnerable to such a relationship, particularly my desire to please and tendency to take responsibility for others' emotions. Reconnecting with family and friends proved both healing and humbling. My parents welcomed me, without judgment, simply expressing relief at having the real Adam back in their lives. Diane became my strongest advocate, checking in daily and helping me navigate the practical and emotional challenges of rebuilding my life. Friends I had neglected returned with surprising forgiveness. Frank and his wife Emma invited me to dinner weekly, gradually reintegrating me into our social circle. When I apologized for my absence, Frank simply said, "True friendship survives the hurricanes, man. We just waited out the storm." Learning to trust my own judgment again was perhaps the hardest part of recovery. Years of having my perceptions questioned and decisions criticized had left me second-guessing even simple choices. My therapist suggested starting with small, inconsequential decisions, gradually working up to larger ones without seeking external validation. I rediscovered passions that had been set aside during my marriage. I joined a weekend hiking group, reconnecting with the mountains I had once loved exploring. I dusted off my guitar slowly, remembering chord progressions, and eventually writing songs about my experience. I read books Jessica had dismissed as waste of time, discovering new ideas and perspectives that expanded my world. The divorce proceedings were predictably difficult. Jessica alternated between vicious attacks and tearful pleas, often within the same conversation. She contested everything, dragged out proceedings, and tried to turn mutual friends against me with distorted versions of our marriage. With my attorney's help and solid documentation, we eventually reached a settlement. I conceded more financially than was perhaps fair, but the freedom was worth more to me than material possessions or money. When the divorce was finalized 11 months after I left, I celebrated quietly, with Frank and Diane feeling like I could finally breathe fully again. 6 months into my new life, I changed jobs, accepting a position with a smaller company that offered more creative control and a collaborative environment. The new role reinvigorated my passion for software development and introduced me to colleagues who quickly became friends. Through Frank, I learned about a support group for men who had experienced relationship abuse. Initially reluctant, I eventually attended a meeting and found profound validation in hearing stories that mirrored my own. Over time, I began sharing my experience first in the group and eventually in online forums where others might recognize their own situations in my words. 14 months after leaving Jessica, I attended a weekend workshop on mental health and creativity. The facilitator, Sophia, was a clinical psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery through artistic expression. Her approach was practical, but deeply compassionate, and I found myself staying after the session to ask questions about her methods. Sophia suggested coffee to continue the conversation, and what began as professional interest gradually evolved into friendship. She was easy to talk to, insightful without being intrusive, and refreshingly direct in her communication. Most importantly, she respected boundaries naturally, never pressuring for more information or time than I was comfortable giving. Our friendship developed slowly over months of occasional meetings and thoughtful conversations. When Sophia eventually expressed interest in a more personal relationship, my first reaction was fear. I worried about my ability to maintain healthy boundaries, to recognize warning signs, to trust both her and myself. "I understand your hesitation," she said when I expressed these concerns. "Take all the time you need. Healthy relationships survive patience." That response itself told me everything about the difference between manipulation and respect. We continued as friends for several more months before I felt ready to explore a romantic relationship. Even then, we moved forward deliberately, each step taken with clear communication and mutual agreement. Now, 2 years after leaving my marriage, I am in a relationship I once would not have believed possible. Sophia and I communicate openly, disagree respectfully, and support each other's independence as well as our connection. Intimacy between us is never weaponized or conditioned, but freely given as an expression of our feelings for each other. The contrast between my past and present relationships has taught me profound lessons about love, respect, and personal worth. I learned that real love does not diminish you to elevate the relationship. It does not demand sacrifice of your core self or isolate you from others who care about you. Real love multiplies connections rather than dividing them, expands your world rather than contracting it. I discovered that my value as a person is inherent, not earned through meeting someone else's shifting expectations. No one has the right to set conditions on basic respect and care in a relationship. Love should feel like freedom, not captivity. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that it is never too late to reclaim your life and rediscover your worth. The day I told Jessica she could keep her manipulative tactics forever was the day I began finding not just someone better, but something better. A life of authenticity and peace I had forgotten was possible. If you are in a relationship where affection, respect, or basic kindness are treated as rewards for compliance, know that this is not love. You deserve unconditional respect. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not what you provide. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away. Have you ever been in a relationship where your partner used manipulation tactics to control you? How did you recognize what was happening? And what steps did you take to reclaim your power? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, recognizing unhealthy patterns is the first step toward breaking free from them. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you relationships built on mutual respect, trust, and genuine love.